I expected on a Tuesday morning in October was to be escorted out of my own plant by a 29-year-old in a North Face fleece vest. No warning, no HR meeting, no paper trail, just a badge reader that flashed red, two security guards who couldn't look me in the eye, and a kid who smelled like sandalwood telling me I wasn't a culture fit. 24 years, gone before the first shift whistle. My name is Gary Decker. I'm 54 years old. For 24 years, I was the plant operations director at Iron Gate Manufacturing in Youngstown, Ohio. If you've driven across a bridge in the Midwest, worked in a building with structural steel, or bought a truck assembled in this part of the country, there's a reasonable chance my name is somewhere in the supply chain that made it happen. Not on a plaque, not in a press release, just in the paperwork, in the phone logs, in the handshake agreements with men who've been doing this longer than the kid who fired me has been alive. I'm telling you this not to brag. I'm telling you so you understand what it means when the machine stops. Hank Calloway, senior, built Iron Gate from nothing. Started in 1987 with a leased building, 11 guys, and payment terms that required a lot of trust on both sides. By the time I came on in 2001, it was a $400 million operation. 3 facilities, contracts with 6 state DOTs, and a reputation in the Rust Belt that meant something. Hank was 44 then. Tough, direct, knew the price of everything. We had a simple arrangement. I kept the floor running, he kept the checks clearing. That was it. No speeches, no vision retreats, just work. Then his daughter married Bryce. Bryce Calloway? He took the family name when they married, which tells you something right there. 29 years old, MBA from a school that had Hank's name on a building wing, good teeth. The kind of confidence that only comes from never having faced a real consequence. When Hank semi-retired to Florida at 68, he handed Bryce the CEO title. Figured the kid would learn on the job, grow into it. He did not grow into it. First week, Bryce installed a cold brew tap in the break room. Fine. Second week, he outsourced our floor safety inspection team to a firm with 0 heavy manufacturing experience. Third week, he promoted a woman named Tiffany to Director of Operations Culture, which is corporate language for a title you give someone who shouldn't be anywhere near an operations budget. I kept my head down. I've survived 3 recessions, a plant fire, and a supplier strike in January that had us rerouting structural steel from Canada through weather that shut down I-80 for 36 hours. I could survive Bryce. That's what I told myself. The friction was gradual, like a bearing that needs grease but nobody notices until the whole spindle seizes. Bryce didn't like me because I was a reminder that the plant ran fine before him. I represented the old way, the way that actually worked, and that made him uncomfortable. One afternoon, he walked past my workstation, looked at the spec sheets and load tolerance printouts stacked across my desk and said, "This looks like a salvage yard, Gary. Bad optics for investors." I told him I was mid-negotiation with 3 Midwest suppliers on a structural delivery spec, and if I cleared my desk, he'd lose the Ohio DOT contract before Friday. He gave me the smile people give to elderly relatives who say something confusing and walked away. Tiffany laughed. I closed the deal. Iron Gate made $38 million on that delivery cycle. I got an email from HR about workspace standards, but the real breaking point wasn't the desk. It never is. It's always the personal thing that lights the fuse. Late October, peak season. I was running on 4 hours of sleep and bad coffee. Then a calendar invite landed in my inbox. Mandatory Leadership Vision Retreat. Saturday evening, Bryce Calloway's estate. Saturday was the worst possible day. We had 3 blast furnace cycles running through the weekend. The suppression system locking sequence required a certified operator on site, me specifically, because I was the only ISO 9001 and OSHA authorized signatory on record with the state of Ohio for our facility. That's not a title. That's a legal designation. It means I'm the person the state holds responsible if something goes wrong during a high-risk cycle. You can't just hand that to someone else on a Friday afternoon. I sent Bryce a 1-paragraph email, explained the situation. Professional, specific, said I'd join the next one. He didn't reply. The next morning I swiped my badge at the main entrance and got the red light. I thought the reader was glitchy. Tried again. Same. I reached for my phone and then heard it. Dress shoes on concrete. You don't hear dress shoes on a plant floor, it's always work boots. Always. Bryce came around the corner with Tiffany holding a clipboard and two security guards who looked like they wished they'd called in sick. "We're making structural changes," Bryce said. "Your approach doesn't align with where we're taking the company." I looked at him. "You're firing me. It's a culture decision." Tiffany said something about frequencies. I stopped listening after the second word. "Gary," I said, cutting Tiffany off, "I'm the only ISO 9001 and OSHA authorized signatory this plant has on record with the state of Ohio. That's not a job title. It's a legal certification. It means every safety audit, every supplier delivery approval, every hazmat clearance runs through my signature. If I leave, those don't transfer to the cloud. They don't transfer anywhere until the state certifies a replacement. That process takes 90 to 120 days minimum." Bryce smoothed his tie. "Everyone's replaceable, Gary. That's business 101. I reached into my pocket and set my badge in his palm. Didn't slam it. Didn't say another word about the certification. He'd find out what it meant on his own soon enough. I grabbed my jacket off the back of my chair, grabbed the photo of Duke, my yellow lab, 8 years old, bad hips, still thinks he's a puppy, off my desk. And I walked out. The air outside smelled like diesel and cold Ohio morning. I sat in my 2018 F-150 for a few minutes without starting the engine. Just listened to the wind coming off the lot. My phone buzzed. "Renee, they did it?" she said. "Yeah." A pause. "Did they offer severance?" "Didn't get that far." Another pause. Longer. "Come home when you're ready. I'll put coffee on." That was it. No drama. She'd seen this coming for 2 years. Renee Decker is smarter than me about people. Always has been. She knew what Bryce was the first time she heard me describe him at the dinner table. I was the one who kept thinking I could outlast it. I didn't go home yet. I drove to the Iron Kettle, a diner on Route 11 where the truckers eat because the coffee is honest and nobody asks questions. Corner booth. Donna poured without me asking. I opened my laptop and pulled up my personal Gmail, the address I'd given to every supplier rep, every union steward, and every state safety inspector I'd worked with over 24 years. I always told them the same thing. If the building burns down, use this address. Well, the match was lit. Here's the thing about ISO 9001 and OSHA signatory authority that most people outside heavy manufacturing don't know. It's not like a password you can reset or a role you can reassign with an org chart update. The state of Ohio certifies a specific individual, by name, by license number, as the responsible party for safety compliance operations at a given facility. When that person leaves, every contract clause that references authorized signatory goes into automatic suspension. Suppliers who've built their own liability protection around your certification have a legal right to pause services until a qualified replacement is verified. I'd helped write those clauses into our master service agreements 15 years ago, when Hank was nervous about supplier trust during an aggressive expansion phase. He thought it was overkill at the time. Bryce didn't know those clauses existed. Bryce thought steel showed up because someone clicked approve in a procurement app. I drafted one email, clean, factual, 4 sentences. Subject, notice of change in authorized signatory status. Body, I, Gary Decker, am no longer employed by Irongate Manufacturing effective today. As the sole ISO 9001 and OSHA certified operations signatory on record with the state of Ohio for this facility, my departure triggers an automatic review period under the key personnel continuity clause of all active master service agreements. All safety-dependent approvals requiring my signature are suspended pending verified successor appointment. Please direct urgent matters to Bryce Calloway, CEO. Then I went down the supplier list alphabetically and hit send, over and over. It felt like turning off lights in a building, one room at a time. By 10 a.m., my phone was going constantly. Suppliers, freight coordinators, state inspection contacts. Bryce called 4 times. I let it ring. Clint, our union steward, 31 years on the floor, hands like catcher's mitts. Texted at 10:20. Gary. Heard the news. We're inside the 90-day window on the overtime agreement renewal. You want me to hold? I texted back. Your call, Clint. I'm not your boss anymore. He called 4 minutes later. His voice was flat and certain, the way it gets when he's already made up his mind. Boys are going to standard hours only. No overtime until we see who's signing the safety paperwork. One domino. I pulled up the public fleet tracking site on my laptop, available to anyone, no login required, and watched the map. Red dots started appearing. A stationary truck shows red after 30 minutes. By 11 a.m., there was a cluster outside Columbus, another outside Pittsburgh. The yard gate codes in Toledo hadn't been updated since Monday. I did that every Tuesday morning. Today was Tuesday. Nobody else knew the rotation. My phone rang. Tiffany. Gary, we can't get into the compliance portal. The state inspector is calling. You have to give us the access codes. I don't have those, Tiffany. They're on the plant server. The server keeps requiring your authentication. That's the two-factor security protocol tied to my state certification credentials. Standard regulatory requirement. Can you just send the code? I'm a private citizen now. Sharing certified signatory credentials with unauthorized personnel is a federal violation. I could face personal liability. You wouldn't want that. Stunned silence. Then Bryce got on the line. The arrogance was still there, but something underneath it had cracked open. Gary, stop this. Come back in. We'll renegotiate. Bryce, you said I was replaceable. I'd start the state successor certification application today. Expect 90 to 120 days. In the meantime, I'd check whether the fuel cards for the refrigeration units were renewed. Those expire on the 15th of the month. Today is the 16th. I usually handle that manually because the automated system glitches with two of our Ohio vendors. A long silence. Then a sound that might have been a fist on a desk. I hung up. Ordered a refill. Donna poured without a word. I looked at the map. More red dots. The machine wasn't breaking. It was freezing, the way a system is supposed to freeze when the safety guarantor walks out the door. Every clause working exactly as written. Outside on Route 11, an iron gate truck rolled past heading toward the highway. Big blue cab, silver logo on the door. The driver had no idea that in about an hour his fuel card was going to get declined at the pump. I didn't feel good about that part. The drivers were never the problem. I found the number for Clint and called him back. The refrigeration units in the Miami yard, I said. Fuel cards bounced. Tell those drivers to decouple and hook to shore power at the cold storage facility. There's a pre-funded emergency contingency account. I set it up 3 years ago for exactly this kind of situation. Charge it there. Already on it, Clint said. Then after a pause, Mama Bear. I almost smiled at that. Almost. I closed the laptop, picked up my coffee. Outside the window, Ohio was gray and flat and exactly the same as it had been yesterday. But something had shifted. For the first time in 24 years, I wasn't managing a crisis for Iron Gate. I was the crisis. And I was just getting started. Around noon, I made the call I'd been putting off for a decade. Reed Hargrove, Regional VP at Hargrove Steel, our biggest competitor in the Ohio-Pennsylvania corridor. He'd tried to recruit me 3 times over the years. Each time I said no. Loyalty to Hank, loyalty to the floor, loyalty to 300 men who showed up every morning because the place worked and they knew it worked because someone like me was making sure it did. Loyalty is a two-way street. Bryce had just paved over my lane. Reed picked up on the second ring. No assistant. That's what I always respected about him. I heard, he said. Just that. I'm free, I told him. How free? Sitting in a diner on Route 11. Personal laptop. 24 years of supplier relationships in my personal contact list. 12 certified steel vendors who just received a notice that Iron Gate's authorized signatory is gone. A short silence. The kind where someone is calculating fast. Stay there. A black Suburban pulled up to the Iron Kettle 45 minutes later. Donna watched me walk out with my beat-up bag and raised both eyebrows. Different kind of Tuesday, Gary. Different kind of everything, Donna. Lunch with Reed was efficient. We'd known each other long enough that neither of us needed to perform. I told him what I wanted. My own division. Full authority on floor level and supplier decisions. No middle management between me and him. And the ability to protect the people who'd always done right by me. He said yes before the food arrived. We shook hands across a table that cost more than my first truck, and that was that. While we were still eating, my phone lit up with a DOT alert. An Iron Gate vehicle on I-76 had jackknifed. Hazardous materials spill. EPA and DOT both responding. I called Clint immediately. Was it one of our guys? No. His voice was different, heavier. Kid off a gig app. Bryce hired him about an hour after the boys went to standard hours. Needed someone to move an industrial solvent load that was already staged and cleared for departure. Gary, the kid didn't have a hazmat endorsement, took a curve too fast outside Akron, jackknifed, leaked solvent across 2 lanes. I set my fork down. Is he alive? He'll live. But Gary, DOT is going to pull Iron Gate's operating authority pending a full safety audit. Mandatory. When they find out the certified signatory left this morning and an uncertified driver was moving hazmat loads the same afternoon, that's not a fine. That's a federal investigation. I looked at Reed across the table. He saw my face and waited. Bryce hired a non-certified contractor to move. A hazmat load, I said. There's been an accident on I-76. DOT is shutting them down. Reed put his water glass down slowly. The driver? Alive. But the plant is done for the foreseeable future. He nodded once. Sign the contract tonight. I told him I needed an hour first. There were people I had to take care of before I took care of myself. For the next 3 hours, sitting in Reed's conference room with a view of a city I'd spent 24 years serving from a cubicle, I worked the phones, supplier by supplier, authorization code by authorization code. I moved Iron Gate's active vendor network to Hargrove, not because I was settling a score, but because those suppliers needed a certified host or their own operations would stall. They came because they trusted me, not the logo on the building. Me. Gail from Iron Gate Payroll texted around 4 p.m. Gary, DOT is in the building. They seized the servers. Bryce is in his office with the door locked. Levi Banks, the company lawyer, is in the parking lot on the phone. And Gary, Hank Sr., is on a plane back from Florida. I checked the flight tracker I still had active from years of coordinating logistics around Hank's travel. Gulfstream G450, landing at Youngstown Warren Regional in 2 hours and 20 minutes. I signed the contract with Reed, shook his hand again, and drove to the airfield. I parked near the gate and waited. The sky had gone that bruised purple that Ohio does in late October, the kind that means the temperature is dropping fast and won't stop. I sat in the truck with the engine off and watched the runway lights flicker on. The Gulfstream came in low and landed hard. Hank always told his pilots to land like they meant it. He was 68 now, but he still moved down the stairs like a man with somewhere important to be. He had his phone to his ear before he hit the tarmac. Then he looked around for his car. No car. His driver was one of the positions Bryce had quietly eliminated in the 3rd round of operational efficiency cuts 2 months ago. He saw my F-150 parked by the gate. He walked over. The look on his face was not a good one. "You," he said. "Get in, Hank. I'm the only ride you've got." He stood there for a moment in the wind, coat flapping, phone still in his hand showing him numbers he didn't want to see. Then he pulled the door open and got in. I pulled out of the airfield and onto the access road. Neither of us said anything for the first mile. The heater was running. The radio was off. Outside, the flat Ohio landscape scrolled past in the dark. "How bad?" he said finally. "DOT has grounded the fleet pending a full safety audit. EPA is working a chemical spill on I-76 that Bryce caused by moving a hazmat load with an uncertified gig driver 4 hours after I walked out the door. 1 man is in the hospital. Levi Banks is in your parking lot because he can't get into the building." Hank's jaw moved, but he didn't say anything. "And I've moved 60% of your active supplier volume to Hargrove, effective today, because if I didn't give those vendors a certified host by end of business, their own operations would have stalled by morning." More silence, then quieter. "The pension fund." I glanced at him. He kept his eyes on the windshield. "Bryce moved money. I found out on the plane. The board has been trying to reach me for 6 hours. He paused. "It's the driver's fund, Gary." I pulled over on the shoulder and put it in park. The driver's fund. The retirement money for men who'd worked that floor for 20, 25, 30 years. Men like the guys Clint represented. Men who drove through January blizzards and never once asked for more than what was in the contract. I sat there with the engine idling and the hazard lights ticking. "How much?" I said. "Enough that if the company goes under, there's nothing left to cover it." I looked out the windshield at the dark road ahead. A long straight shot into Youngstown with nothing moving on it. "Okay," I said. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sell Iron Gate to Hargrove," I said. "Tonight, $1. Hargrove assumes the assets, the facilities, the fleet, and the pension fund liability. The drivers get their retirement. You walk away clean." Bryce answers for what he did on his own. Hank turned and looked at me for the first time since he got in the truck. His eyes were the same cold blue steel I'd known for 24 years, the ones that had never once asked for sympathy. "My life's work," he said, "for $1. Your life's work is currently worth negative equity, Hank. Between the DOT shutdown, the EPA fines, the federal investigation, and whatever Bryce pulled out of the pension fund, you're not selling a company. You're selling a liability. I'm offering you a clean exit and a guarantee that the men who built that place don't lose their retirement because your son-in-law treated the fund like a personal expense account." He looked out the passenger window. A long time passed. The hazard lights kept ticking. A single set of headlights came toward us on the access road and passed without slowing. "Do it," he said. I called Reed from the shoulder of that road with Hank sitting next to me. "Change of plans," I said when he picked up. "We're not just taking the supplier network, we're buying Irongate, the whole company. $1. You assume the pension liability." A pause. "Gary, that's not a business decision. It's the best business decision you'll make this year. You get the fleet, the facilities, 300 workers who will know for the rest of their careers that Hargrove saved their retirement. You want loyalty from a workforce? This is how you buy it. It doesn't go on a poster. It goes in the bones." Another pause. Longer. I could hear him breathing, running the numbers. "Draft it," he said. "I'll have legal ready in an hour." I hung up, put the truck in drive, pulled back onto the road toward Youngstown. Hank didn't say anything for a while. Then, "You negotiated that from the side of a highway. You taught me that the best deals get done when both sides are tired of waiting." He made a sound that might have been a laugh, might have been something else. I drove him to the back of the Irongate lot, the loading dock entrance, the one I'd used every morning for 24 years before anyone else was in the building. He got out slowly, stood there for a moment looking up at the facility, the lights still on in the upper floors where Levi Banks was probably on his 4th phone call of the hour. "You were the best I ever had," Hank said. He wasn't looking at me when he said it. He was looking at the building. "I know," I said. "That's why it cost you so much to lose me." He nodded once, closed the door, walked toward the entrance without looking back. An old man returning to a building that had already changed hands. I sat there for a moment watching him go. 24 years of my life in that facility. Every early morning, every crisis, every winter storm reroute and supplier negotiation and safety audit. All of it had led to this, a Tuesday night in October, sitting in my truck at the loading dock, watching the founder walk back into a company that was no longer his. Then I put it in reverse and drove to Reed's office to sign the final papers. The acquisition closed at 11:40 p.m. 50 pages of legal documentation, 3 lawyers, and 1 cup of bad conference room coffee. When it was done, Reed poured 2 glasses of something expensive and slid one across the table. "Welcome to Hargrove," he said. "I was already here," I said. "Catch up." 3 weeks later, I have a corner office with a glass wall that looks out over the yard. I can see the cranes from my desk. Some of the equipment still has the Irongate markings under a fresh coat of Hargrove paint. We're calling it the acquisition of the year in the regional trade press. I don't read the articles. The drivers kept their pensions. Every single one. Clint sent a flower arrangement that took 2 guys to carry through the door. The card said, "We roll when you say roll." I put it on the windowsill next to the picture of Duke. Bryce is out on bail awaiting trial. Embezzlement, wire fraud, OSHA violations. Levi Banks is cooperating with the federal investigation. Tiffany is apparently launching a podcast about surviving toxic workplaces. I'm told it's doing well. Good for her. Hank is back in Florida. He sent a case of wine last week with no note. I haven't opened it yet. I got a letter from Bryce 3 days ago. Handwritten, from the correctional facility. I read the first 2 lines. Something about how I'd never be anything more than a floor manager, how I'd always be replaceable, and then fed it into the shredder. Watched the pink paper turn to strips, poured a cup of coffee, and sat back down. My phone rang at 6:04 this morning. Clint. "First full production run under Hargrove spec," he said. "All 3 furnace cycles, 0 deviations. Boys want you to know." "Tell them good work," I said. "Already did. They wanted you to hear it anyway." I hung up and looked out the window at the yard. The cranes were moving. The floor was running. The machine was humming the way it's supposed to hum when the right people are in the right places doing the work they know how to do. I didn't need a title on the door to know that. I never did. Thanks for watching. If you've ever been the one holding everything together while someone else took the credit, you already know how this story ends. Hit subscribe. And if your boss is a Bryce, start keeping a personal contact list. You might need it someday. The most dangerous man in any company isn't the one with the corner office. It's the one who knows where every switch is and quietly decides to stop flipping them.